I want to thank our sponsor today, and that is Uphold, where you guys can earn crypto better. A lot of things happening with Uphold staking rewards, so you can stake up to 20 different cryptocurrencies and get into the reward side of things. New tokens, early access, along with full transparency. This is one of the best platforms out there to make trades on when it comes to crypto. The other thing you guys should be doing is this right here. Get the card, the XRP rewards card, which comes in the form of an Uphold debit card. And the nice thing about this, guys, is you can do this without a credit check. Also get up to 6% back on all your purchases for the first 3 months. You can get up to 10% back with a direct deposit stacked in on this. So this is one of the best values out there when it comes to a debit card where you can get into your digital assets. Make sure and check out Uphold. Use the link down below. Let them know we sent you. Welcome back to another episode of the XRP podcast. Today, I'm going to be diving into what's happening in the markets because this, as of recording, there is a lot of things going on. We'll get into all of that. And I'm going to have some special guests, of course, Dom and Phil coming over from EasyA. They have some huge announcements today that you guys don't want to miss. It will affect, I think, maybe what's going on in the XRP community. So stay tuned for all of that. As I always ask, make sure and like and subscribe. If you guys have not done that so far, make sure and do that. We'd love to, of course, grow the community. And one of the things that we're thinking about doing, which is a little bit different, we have our own Barron Market Edge community right now. Over 200,000 members in that. Of course, that's our primary channel. It gets most of the audience. And of course, here with the XRP podcast, what we're looking at doing is launching a community specific for XRP. And if you guys think that's a good idea, let me know in the comments down below. It would be a free community. The idea is to get just more information, whether we drop it through an email list or a Telegram channel. I'm not sure yet. We have all of that built into our system, so it'd be easy to do. So just let me know down in the comments. Let's just get right into it today. I want to hit on a few things before we get Dom and Phil on the show. And one of the things I want to focus on is where the market is right now. There's some ugly issues going on right now with the ETH scenario. If it does lose the 2620 range, and of course, that's what we're looking at right now. As we're recording, we're still above that, but this is a pretty critical zone for ETH. Now, how this will most likely level out for Ethereum, I think, is all dependent on what is happening with the Clarity Act. And of course, we saw the Senate bill got passed. That was on party lines, barely inched through. That at least is some good news, even though because it is a party line vote, I'm a little bit concerned about that. I think we're going to continue to see this push down on a lot of these altcoins. And of course, the biggest one that could be the one loser I'm most concerned about would be Solana, which is risking a 30% drop after it's lost its key support. This is another one that I'm concerned about long term, even though it has, when I say long term, I'm talking about in the next 3 to 4 weeks into the Clarity Act, possibly getting passed hopefully before summer. There are a lot of things that we're going to be breaking down today about that because it will get into some details. So the two tokens I'm concerned with right now, short term, I should say, is going to be Ethereum and Solana. We'll, of course, talk about XRP and where that price point could be going here in a second. And we'll just dive into it because I want to bring in Dom and Phil coming in from EasyA. You guys have seen them on the show before. How are you guys?
Good. Doing very well, Singer. Always fun to back on the show.
So we're going to get a chance to see you here in Miami at your big hackathon. So first of all, let's go into some of the latest news with EasyA. You guys announced a ton of stuff. Give us a rundown of what's going on.
Great question. EasyA Labs is extremely exciting. I said on Twitter that this is almost the culmination of a lot of Dom and my work in the space over the past decade. So Dom and I first got into crypto in 2013, and we've seen so much. We've seen so much growth. We built up such a big community and educated and brought so many people into Web3 through EasyA, and which a lot of you will know as being kind of like the Duolingo for blockchain. You go and you learn about blockchains, you learn about Ripple, the XRP Ledger. Got a new challenge actually coming out on RLUSD, so a little bit of alpha there. Not yet announced publicly yet, but EasyA Labs is the latest chapter in what we're building. So the growth of EasyA has been absolutely phenomenal. This is going to absolutely supercharge growth. And in particular, we are very, very focused on the XRP Ledger. So happy to go into that in a little bit more detail. But I think the headline that anybody can really think about to understand what we're doing at Labs is XRP and The XRP Ledger is what's going to be supercharged by EasyA Labs and crypto in general, but really with a laser focus on XRP.
When you go, Dom, further into the ledger and the opportunity here, because there's a lot of areas in which new innovation could really take place. We've talked about this before. Have you changed your mind any on where you think Ledger is going to be heading in terms of where innovation is going to happen? Where do you guys stand on that right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, the biggest thing about EasyA Labs is really being able to bring the innovation that's been happening in different ecosystems to the XRP ledger and to the whole XRP ecosystem in general. You look at ecosystems like Ethereum, Solana, there are a ton of different dApps, different decentralized applications, different things that provide the holders of their tokens, whether they hold ETH or Solana, with different benefits, like yield is a great example. For example, I think what we want to do with EasyA Labs is really bring those things over to the XRP ledger ecosystem and really give the people in the XRP community a lot of those benefits that they've been missing out on. So far, people hold XRP, and there's a huge, amazing holder base of XRP holders, so to speak. But right now, you can't really do much with your XRP. You can't really put it to work. You can't really earn those yields. You can't borrow against it. And that's why for us, EasyA Labs is so important in terms of bringing those benefits to the everyday user and holder, but also then building out the whole ecosystem and making sure that the XRP ledger becomes that ecosystem that new people coming into crypto are naturally attracted to because of those different use cases.
I'm looking at your tweet. This was on just the other day. You guys were out there doing a news tour. And one of the statements here that kind of caught me by surprise, I didn't realize this, is that you guys surpassed a $4 billion valuation in terms of the EasyA ecosystem. Explain how you calculate that. What is all involved in the ecosystem to get to that kind of valuation?
Yeah, definitely. So these are all the companies that have essentially come through EasyA, launched, and then gone on to raise and receive those valuations. So you could think of some of the amazing companies that have come through EasyA, both across the crypto space, but then also in the last sort of year or so in the AI space. One great example of a crypto company that's been absolutely crushing it and really stemmed out of EasyA and actually got its start in EasyA app and then came to a hackathon, launched, etc., is Axel. So they provide yield on stablecoins for pretty much anyone. They're gearing up to be the sort of crypto bank for the everyday individual. And they've raised from A16Z, which is the world's best crypto VC. They've also raised from a ton of other VCs. They've just been crushing it. We've also seen amazing companies like Cognition AI, which in itself actually is valued at over, I believe, $10 billion on the latest raise. So that number, that 4 billion actually needs to go up. We need to update that. But essentially, they are reinventing the way people interact with AI. They make it much more accessible. And they're also helping developers who are building applications build things much faster with the help of AI. So they also, again, started with EasyA. They started at the EasyA Hackathon, and they just grew like wildfire over the last couple of years. And they've also raised from Founders Fund and other incredible VCs, I believe, even some sovereign wealth funds. So there are some really cool projects that are sort of, making global headlines that have come out of the EasyA ecosystem. And those are just a few. We have a whole map of all the hundreds of projects that are coming out and actually accruing a ton of value to the underlying blockchains.
Do you guys have one of those ecosystem maps where it shows all of the different development projects out there? Is it over on your site anywhere? Or where we can?
Yeah, we do. It actually, we posted on X a couple times, and it's actually in the video that you were just looking at.
Was that the one? Okay, we showed that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. There was a big chart with a bunch of different, a couple hundred different projects, and those are all the ones that essentially come out of the work that we've been doing. Okay. And, for us, it's really about bringing more of those projects into crypto, onto the blockchain, onto the XRP ledger, and then bringing that utility, because that's where the utility comes from.
So we obviously are, well, first of all, the fact that you guys have had so much new innovation, and by the way, these hackathons are unbelievable in terms of attendance. I know you guys are heading to Hong Kong. Are you doing a hackathon there as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we will be. So we're heading to Hong Kong next week, actually, for Consensus Hong Kong, which is the biggest crypto conference in the whole of Asia.
We'll be hosting a big hackathon there alongside the main conference itself.
Okay.
We'll have all the best blockchains, all the best developers, entrepreneurs, founders, and that's going to be a huge event.
Fantastic. Well, of course, we'll get a chance to see you down here in Miami coming up soon as well, which is going to be, I think, going to be a little bit of a Super Bowl. I noticed that Solana is doing the Accelerate program at the same time as we'll see, some of the other events that are happening, obviously, here in Miami in May, along with what you guys are doing. So we're going to be doing a on-the-ground coverage of that one. So we'll talk more about that offline, but I think that'll be a fun time. All right, so let's get into what's happening with Clarity, Dom. I know you were on Trade Talks the other day, kind of positioning the market for that we need clarity. Many people would say, all right, there's a lot of problems with the current way that this act is being presented, especially when you look at the integration of the DCIA, which is coming in from the Ag Committee, which passed through the Senate. When you look at the current pressure on DeFi, within at least the way it's written right now, we don't know what this new markup is going to look like, where negotiations have been made. Brad Garlinghouse, of course, has come out in favor of it the way it was. Brian Armstrong, Coinbase, not in favor of it. It would shut down a lot of their products. I put out a tweet this morning that kind of broke down some of this in terms of the value proposition it represented for Ripple. First of all, and I know it's not all about Ripple in the sense of this is broader based for crypto in general, but where do you see the stumbling blocks for this to go through that you're most concerned about?
Yeah, I think we're in a very interesting place with respect to the Clarity Act at the moment. I think you have two different sides. You have the crypto lobby and you have the banking lobby, and they're really at loggerheads right now. Obviously, the banking lobby doesn't want crypto to steal all of their market share. If people are allowed to have yield on stablecoins and these sorts of things, it's really going to become a no-brainer for people to actually use the crypto products that these different blockchains are building. And the use cases will become so apparent to the everyday user that, as we saw, the Bank of America CEO said hundreds of billions in deposits will actually flow away from those traditional banks to crypto products, which is obviously amazing for crypto companies and people in the crypto space like us and Ripple, etc. But it's not so good, obviously, for the banks. And so that's the main concern on the banking side. And then on the crypto side, of course, people want to make sure that, and there's lobbyists want to make sure that all of those different provisions around yield can actually be there so that crypto does become that really popular alternative to those big banks. And I think ultimately it's, an argument over who has the better products.
Yeah.
And that's really the way it should be. I think that's really how the future should be determined. That's always how it's played out in capitalism. It's whoever has the best products wins. And I think right now the banks are just so stuck in their ways. They don't want to have these new technologies that are going to come in and steal their lunch. And that's why they're so opposed to it. And they're doing everything they can to stall it and make sure that it changes form and really doesn't actually have a lot of the benefits that make crypto so unique. So I think that's really what's happening at the moment. And that's what's causing a bit of pressure in the markets. Personally, I would like to see the Clarity Act get passed. That's with many other people in its current form, albeit with some changes. And I think it will get passed. Ultimately, we do need to see that in order for those more sort of traditional institutions also to get into crypto.
No.
Because once Clarity Act gets passed, they can also start acting with more clarity and they can actually be more sort of aware of how the future is going to be. And then they can put huge money behind it. It's very hard for big institutions, traditional organizations to get into the space if they don't know what's going to happen in a year or two. Maybe a different act comes into place, or maybe there isn't enough certainty for them to actually put that huge capital behind something that's so nascent as crypto at the moment. And so, yeah, definitely need the Clarity Act to get passed in order for the industry to advance.
Phil, when you look at the amount of developers that are coming into the space through EasyA, how big of a deal is it for these new innovators in terms of clarity? Are they kind of outside the lines in terms of being able to build product, or are they more in the crosshairs here?
It's a really good question. I can take that from a very personal standpoint initially, right? With EasyA Labs. With us, we want fundamentally to help people make more money on their money. And I think that's really what a lot of crypto is about. It's the same idea that Brian Armstrong of Coinbase, of course, is thinking like, look, we want to help people make more money with their money. And when you look at what EasyA Labs is doing, we want to help people get yield on their XRP We were just having some great conversations at an SF together with Evernorth, together with Ripple, about how we can actually put this together. And ultimately, the danger that's happening right now with the Clarity Act and certain amendments is, what if that means that we, as the people who are building the infrastructure, need to comply with the same sorts of regulations as banks, even though we really don't do anything that's remotely similar to a bank? Big reason that banks are very heavily regulated is because they do a lot of things that are actually fundamentally very, very risky. Ultimately, the core thing being fractional reserve banking. They're lending money out. All the money that you have that they've got in as depositors from you as a depositor is not necessarily there because it's lent out to other people. That's where this massive risk to the whole system comes in. When we're talking about decentralized finance, of course, stuff like that sometimes does happen in some of the protocols that may be a little bit riskier, where you have under-collateralized lending and loans and those sorts of things. But really, if you're talking about the bread and butter, the prime institutional grade services, they are very, very different. Really, what we're building is infrastructure that people can build on top of. And so from a personal level, with what we're building at EasyA Labs, I want clarity, but I want clarity to make sure that we and what we're building is treated in a similar way to just technology, right? We put the technology out there. It's non-custodial. Anybody can use it. And ultimately, that's up to them. It's like, we're not going to regulate you lending to your brother like, $100 or $1,000. That should just be totally peer-to-peer. It shouldn't, you shouldn't be regulated like a bank if you're just doing something like that. And then if we look at developers more broadly, I think that, to your point, there's a lot of developers who are very, very excited about crypto because ultimately this is where the future is heading. But a lot of people are just very, very hesitant. They just don't know, okay, what's going to happen, as Dom said, maybe a year or two down the line, I built this amazing protocol and boom, maybe I've fallen afoul because I don't know exactly where the lines are. So I think that ultimately is what is holding back a lot of developers from coming into the space. And we have made a lot of headway with the Genius Act as well. But obviously we have a lot of work to do ahead of us too.
Well, when we look at it through all of our research, we have some great, contacts in DC that have been able to share information. And as we all, I think most people watching this show probably understand the big roadblocks that set in front of it. One, of course, is the banking committee hold right now. That's mostly Senator Tim Scott that's in that. In terms of management, remember, we were supposed to go to vote. That got canceled because of Coinbase basically saying, hey, wait, on this, we're not so sure about it because of the way it was. Of course, the trickery that happened out of the Senate was the fact that they dropped that bill 48 hours before the vote. So they gave nobody time to really look at it. The yield controversy is the big one. I think, unfortunately, we lose that battle when it comes to yield. Whether it makes its way into DeFi, I think the real concern I have is protecting developers and making sure that at least we do that, and that at DeFi still has some sort of preservation around KYC. And of course, self-custody is another one. But right now, it's very big in terms of party line friction. And I think that's the one, because remember, DCIA, which was the Senate Act just yesterday, passed along very strict party lines. I think it was 12-11. So think about that. Without any kind of Democratic buy-in, like Cory Booker, who is one of the ones that have walked away. This bill, especially the Clarity Act, is probably going to struggle to get 60 votes. But however, you've got executive support, obviously, from Trump. House support is already there. I mean, it passed the House 294 to 134. So you would think they could carry over the Senate consensus, which is the one that is the most difficult, I think, going forward. But right now, I'm still giving it about a 50 to 60% chance of making it through. Where would you guys call it right now on percentage?
I think just building off top of your previous points, I think just to emphasize how important this is, I think people sometimes underestimate the impact which regulation can have, and also these sorts of lawmaking and legislation can have. A great example that happened in recent history in crypto is what happened with privacy. So a lot of developers around 5-10 years ago were focused on privacy, and privacy in crypto pretty much completely just stopped dead in its tracks because of some of the basically actions that got taken against some of the developers, right? People building, obviously, there's weird stuff that happened with Tornado Cash, which isn't good. Obviously, a lot of money laundering, but ultimately the developers also got into a lot of trouble, and those people are just building the code. And you saw what happened, Zcash, a lot of demand for Zcash. You have the developers, development pretty much slowed. You have people like Eli Ben Sassoon, one of the co-founders, who basically went on to work at Stocknet because for those developers, it was just too difficult to build. So I think, just on the back of your points, Paul, absolutely right that this is so fundamentally important for developers and for bringing the industry forward, right? We want privacy. Nobody wants their transactions. Like, you go into a store, everybody knows exactly what you bought, their net worth and everything. We need this. To your point of what I think is going to happen with the Clarity Act, I think, midterms looming is something that is concerning. I think we need to get this passed very soon. Dom and I were just on the NASDAQ talking with Jill Maladrino over on the Trade Talks show as well. That's something that I think industry experts are all very, very concerned about at the moment, because really if it gets passed, it's going to need to pass very, very soon. Ultimately, it's going to come down to, I think, a matter of, look, how much are we going to be, how much are we going to care, exactly as you said, about, what form this gets passed in. I think you've got industry Goliaths on either end, like Brad Garlinghouse, you've got Brian Armstrong as well. And I think it's going to come down to, look, what are the amendments that are coming?
Yeah, for sure.
And how can we align people?
Yeah. Well, and many people will say, well, what does this really affect Ripple? Who cares? We've been operating without it. And I put out a tweet that kind of outlined some elements within this morning. And this is kind of looking at the, the correlation of where a Clarity Act could affect XRP. My bear case right now is really what we're dealing with currently as it's trading under $1.80. We got to hold this position. But the concern I have is really where we see kind of this purgatory for XRP, primarily because if Ripple is held from being able to execute in the US and have to go state by state, that will slow them down. And if it slows them down in general, I think that you lose sentiment in the markets. And of course, that's the point I'm getting at. However, if this does pass, I mean, at that point, you could see XRP and other tokens double in a very quick time just because of the advancement of what this does for Ripple in general. When you look at the liquidations that we're seeing right now on XRP, now we're starting to see maybe some whale acquisition right now around the 170 mark. Is this an indicator for you guys when you just think about XRP, the token, that is positive, or do you think this is more predatory? People just soaking it up as it starts to drop?
I think it's positive. I mean, I think, people sell tokens for a variety of different reasons, and they sell stocks for a variety of different reasons. But people typically buy for one reason, which is they think it's going to go up. And so I think what we've seen as well in different ecosystems is actually when people are very bearish, the major whales, of course, they start selling because they're privy to a lot of information that regular people on the outside aren't privy to. And so we've seen it as well with different ecosystems we've worked with in the past, where the token sort of spirals down. There isn't really any future in the ecosystem, in the project. And big believers of the project actually start cashing out. They start going silent, and they start just simply disappearing. And people have done this on huge scales, tens of millions of dollars worth of tokens just being dumped on the market every single day. There's actually someone that we knew who was dumping, quite literally $10 million off the token every single day in that particular ecosystem, and there was just relentless selling pressure. And obviously that destroys the chart. And when the chart is destroyed in a token, it's very hard to ever get that chart back and to regain that bullish sentiment. So definitely that's obviously bearish. In terms of whales buying, that's typically, in my eyes, a good sign. And seeing those big buys means that they believe in the token, of course, and they believe that there is something, that there is an extremely bright future ahead. And it's those whales that typically end up moving the market. Obviously, retail can when they all work together. But I think, yes, definitely a bullish trend to see that. And I think, like you said, Clarity Act is just causing a lot of uncertainty at the moment. Whether it gets passed or not, I don't think the future of XRP typically will be affected to the downside, even if it doesn't get passed. I think, like you said, there's always routes around it. Going state to state, even outside the US. There's so much crypto activity that happens outside the US, and some of the biggest use cases are actually outside the US. If you look at Latin America, if you look at Asia, if you look at Africa, there is a ton of things that people are currently already doing with crypto as opposed to people in the US. I think in the US, crypto is more of a luxury in many respects, and it's a really cool thing, and it's still, still very nascent, and there's still a lot of opportunity locally. But if you look at those developing countries, it's a necessity. It's actually something that people need in order to transfer money to their relatives. It's something they need because they don't have access to a bank. It's something that they need because that's how people in the US will transfer money to them if, for example, the immigrants here. So yeah, it's a very powerful tool on a very sort of just a speculative asset that people hold and hope to make money from. So I think there's still a huge opportunity. And obviously, that's what we're working on at EasyA Labs as well, in terms of bringing those use cases to life, both in the US, but also further afield beyond, which is also one of the reasons why we're going to Hong Kong.
Phil, I want to kind of carry on with the US side of this because even though we are seeing growth around the world, and yes, to a certain extent, the crypto market has grown to about $3.5 trillion without any regulation. In fact, it was a wild west, if you go back to 21 and 17, and it's been able to kind of grow, but it hasn't ever really become a real asset class. And this, of course, would change that. How big, let's just assume clarity goes through. I think yield is going to get thrown on the altar. We'll maybe get some protections around DeFi and privacy. Most likely, I think some of the elements, obviously self-custody will stay. Those will probably be the points that at least I feel like. If that goes through the way that I'm constructing there, how big of a deal would that be for the United States in terms of innovation? Do you guys see just an absolute onslaught of development? What would you expect?
I do. I mean, even if some of those pieces that we would have hoped for get left out, I think absolutely. I think developers will come back onshore. We're already seeing crypto companies coming onshore. Like Gran, obviously, Ripple has seen so much of their business also increase. The number of, Brad Garlinghouse said this would be like a year or so, that the number of clients that have been working with them, number of partnerships that just skyrocketed. I think that absolutely, like once we get this is a time when everything's going to come back onshore. And this is part of like the broader narrative, which the current administration is going for as well, right? Like bring everything back home. A lot of people got pushed out because of very, very hostile crypto regulations, or rather lack thereof, crypto enforcement and regulation by enforcement. I think it's going to be huge. I think even when we look at our founders as well and our founder friends, a lot of very, very talented founders are looking to come back who, previously had left the States and had gone and set up shop either in Europe or in Asia. A ton of people, I'm sure that you will know as well and have seen, went to Singapore, they went to Hong Kong. Those absolutely thrived as crypto hubs. Obviously, Ripple set up an office in Singapore as well. I think that this is going to be a massive opportunity for developers and also for users, because remember that these developers and these founders are building products ultimately for end users. So that's going to mean that actually if your US consumer can activate and start using these applications, it's massive. I mean, how many of us out here have gone onto a crypto website, a decentralized application that says, oh, sorry, you're accessing this from the US, you're not able to access this product. It's insane. How much has that happened over the past few years? Like, if that little pop-up can go and we can start accessing these products, it's going to be absolutely huge.
Yeah, I think this is a key thing for really kind of the maybe the future of innovation on blockchain, because there's so much more that I think will happen. Even though we are seeing a lot of companies, I still think when you think about it, Wall Street has the most to lose here, because the infrastructure in which tokenized securities, RWAs, are really proliferating. It's happening fast. Robinhood just announced this week that they're going to go ahead and launch, which I thought was interesting. You had Ondo that got a statement in from the SEC that said, wait a minute, we think this is going to be okay, the way that it's being constructed as these secondary products, which is kind of unique in its own right. And then, of course, now you have Trump announcing Kevin Warsh as the new Fed chair. So this is a big deal. What do you think? I mean, because you've got the SEC, you've got Wall Street. Now you have a Fed chair that is all pro blockchain and crypto. How could this not go through? It just seems like everything's lined up. First of all, what did you think about Kevin Warsh for the Fed chair position?
Don't think you're on mute there.
Well, I think it's an interesting one, actually, because he is, of course, pro-crypto, but he's also a bit more hawkish than some of the other picks that were in the running, like Rick Rieder. I tweeted yesterday that I thought Rick Rieder would be nominated. Of course, it turns out that, Kevin Warsh was instead. And I think while, Rick Rieder would have been great in terms of lowering rates, and he's definitely much more dovish. So he's, in favor of those lower rates and in favor of really that sort of economic expansion. I think it's interesting to see a guy like Kevin Warsh step into the seat because, of course, he's been a long-time proponent, actually, of Bitcoin and hopefully of other cryptos. But he definitely is one of the right guys, I think, to take the helm. And we'll see what his stance on rates is. I think if he doesn't lower rates, he'll face a lot of pressure, of course, from Trump, as Powell did. But then again, Trump wouldn't have picked him if he thought he was going to be too hawkish.
Yeah,
so I think it's an interesting one. It's a little bit there is a little bit of uncertainty around him, I think, in my eyes, but we'll see. Time will tell.
Well, just for everybody, just so they know, I mean, these are kind of the statements that we've seen from him in the past. He called Bitcoin as gold, which is a pretty big deal in the sense that we have a positive. This may be better for Bitcoin, actually, I think, when you look at it. He's also been an advisor to Bitwise, which is a big deal. That affects, obviously Bitwise is very active in ETH, XRP, Solana. And then I think the other thing that you've got to look at this, he's very pro-innovation, which is in alignment with what's going on. Not that he really matters at the Fed, but when you look at just the narrative that comes out of the biggest money printer in the world, the fact that they're pro-innovation, that's a good thing. I think that's a good thing in general. But I do think you hit it on the head there, Dom, is that he is a little bit more hawkish, which would indicate that the Fed still has independence. And that has been a big concern of the markets, of the Fed having independence. So if this is going to be the olive branch out of the administration to keep Fed independence, hopefully this will be a good thing. Phil, when you consider all things right now, it's clear that Powell, especially now with the CPI coming out and PPI coming out higher and hotter than what we anticipated. Remember, that's December data. Do you anticipate a Fed rate cut anytime soon?
I think that's what everybody is kind of positioned for at the moment. I mean, we talk with our friends who are really plugged into Wall Street. We talk with, people out on SF as well. And everybody really rate cuts are so fundamentally important that they just sort of hit every aspect. And so whether you're a founder, whether you're on Wall Street and you're actively trading this, I think everybody is pricing something in. It's just a matter of when and how soon these things are going to come.
Well, the point would be right now is probably going to be sometime in June. If in fact, the other thing is obviously we have to, I think it's May for Powell's last official term, whether or not they can go out and start the confirmation process early. I'm not sure about that. Maybe they can. I'm not, that of course would have to happen before he would be officially in there. And remember, this is a board of governors. So there has to be, even though there was 2 dissents this week when the FOMC ruling came down of a pause, it would still require that. Interestingly, I think the point that you guys are making is that this guy may come in and stay on pause right now, especially with the CPI, PPI still a bit hot overall.
Yeah. And everyone's just waiting for those rate cuts, more rate cuts. And, with a bigger magnitude, so to speak.
Do you think it's rate cut or clarity that would be more impactful on the market?
I think rate cuts. I think, ultimately all of the market's actions and the price action is determined by fiscal and monetary policy to, the biggest extent that there is anything actually controlling the markets. I think clarity obviously is a very important part too, especially when you look at the longer term. Clarity will allow people, of course, to use crypto on a much broader scale, to use things like yield and to really access those different benefits of DeFi. So legislation, things like clarity, things that we've seen in the past that have, really shaped the future of crypto longer term and the regulatory side. Obviously, those are good things, and we need those things in order for the industry to grow. But when you really look at sort of short to medium term price action, that is determined by the different monetary and fiscal policies that get enacted. So rate cuts, for example, things like Powell's words, for example, they have huge effects on the markets. And we see that every single time that he speaks, the market either goes up suddenly or it goes down suddenly. Whereas you look at something like, the Genius Act getting passed didn't really necessarily have too much of an effect in the price action. And that's why everyone always says, we had so much good news, but why is the price not moving? And ultimately, that's because these are very long-term things. They're not necessarily short-term, movers of price. And that's really sort of where the Fed plays a role, where things that people like Trump says and, news essentially, like headline news comes into play, as opposed to those sorts of broader sweeping changes. But we need both, definitely.
And people are more visualize. I think it's interesting to visualize it so that people understand what the pipeline actually looks like once this legislation gets passed. Look at Ripple as a good example. Ripple, after the SEC case closed, obviously, huge price action there, but and on XRP. But if you look at, after that, and we look at Genius and these sorts of things, right? The way that this works is, okay, case closed. Now we can start actually moving with a little bit more clarity, and there is more clarity around that and more guidance, and it's just a lot clearer, right? Now we have a pro crypto administration. Okay, now we can start bringing a lot of stuff back onshore. And so, Ripple hiring heavily across different roles, especially in the States. And they see all these partnerships, right? They see people who now are like, okay, great, now we can work together. So we start to see that. But ultimately, look, all these different partnerships take a little bit of time, right? People are excited and they want to do it. Now, okay, you got to get on a call, right? You got to start these meetings. And it takes a while then for these things to start rippling out into the ecosystem before those actual products start getting built, those integrations start happening. And, even if we look forwards a little bit, look, there's a little bit that needs to happen in terms of actually just setting those processes out. But then you can see that later down the line, everything that this has been building up, and I know Brad likes to use the analogy of, you're holding this balloon underwater, and it's just going to float upwards. Like that is, really what we look at. It's like all this that's building up beneath the surface. And then boom, finally, once all this preparation that we've been putting in behind the scenes comes to the fore, that's when that starts to happen and ricochet throughout the markets, as opposed to maybe being something where it's just like a one and done sort of thing.
How big of a deal?
I know a lot of people like things.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I know a lot of people like to see things happen instantly in crypto because that's, the nature of the industry and why a lot of people come into the space. But yeah, these things typically do take a little bit more time than most people anticipate. But that's definitely not a reason to get bearish.
Let's go on to some other news here. Obviously, Ripple rolls out Ripple's Treasury. This, of course, coming in through the G Treasury deal. This is a big deal because obviously this kind of sets the narrative. It's I would say the death to the narrative of, that Ripple's primary business was selling, XRP, but in reality, this is a revenue generating software business. Obviously, XRP is part of it, but it starts to break down the narrative, I think, in general. And the other point that this gets to is they're going to be transitioning from, rather than an XRP only, now to a multi-asset, with RLUSD being part of this. When you think about that, because this I know has been asked to Brad many times, in terms of maybe creating some reduced volatility for XRP, do you think this matters in general, that now we're starting to see more of a level playing field, possibly other assets being involved around RLUSD and XRP, with the fact that they're doing so much on the Treasury side of things? Does it hurt XRP in general or help?
Yeah, I can kick it off and then go to Don. I think on G Treasury, the reason G Treasury is really interesting for me is because I've just seen, in terms of just for EasyA, even in terms of managing our Treasury as well, there are just no good products that allow you to manage crypto alongside, more traditional, assets. You're just your cash, right? And every accounting product is basically based around your cash, your invoicing like that. And it just doesn't work with crypto at all. And you've got to use all of these different integrations and add-ons. I think that when you look at crypto and just accelerating the crypto industry and looking at institutional adoption, you need to have a really good piece of software that allows you to manage it all together without these different integrations. I mean, that's where I see this fitting in. And I just see this as being one of the ways that Ripple is helping to lubricate the system for these big institutions to come in, so that it's not you need to, for an accounting team within a big corporation, it's not we need to integrate this whole new thing. It's look, we're already using G Treasury, or rather now Ripple Treasury. Okay, boom. It's literally there. It's not so hard for us now to start accepting crypto or start to, have crypto within our treasury. So that's my perspective on this piece of the news.
Well, and remember too that if you look back pre of this acquisition, XRP still had a lot of high volatility. Now you've got the potential here around the primary assets, XRP, RLUSD, along even with, if you go into yield-bearing assets like what they're doing in BUIDL, even though of the acquisition coming on BUIDL very soon. I think that opens things up for it. And remember, they've been targeting kind of the mid-size payment processors. And now they're going to be able to go after, Fortune 500 CFOs and treasurers. So that's a big deal. Infrastructure starts to increase. There's a lot of big benefits here, along with market share, I think, in general. But it's kind of when people ask me about what does this mean for Ripple, I tell them it's like the Bloomberg terminal for money movement. Think of it that way. This is a big deal for Ripple in general. I think because of it, this, of course, will continue to accelerate XRP as one of the primary assets that institutional capital is going to continue to push on. which is huge for the ETFs, et cetera. So lots around that for sure.
Definitely.
You guys have a lot happening. Go ahead and hit on that.
Yeah, I was just going to say, when you combine this with Hidden Road and the different acquisitions like Palisade that Ripple has done in the last year of, real businesses that are actually currently have customers and generating a bunch of revenue, combining them all into one and sort of bringing them, partially onto the XRP Ledger and eventually wholly onto the XRP Ledger, etc. These are all really, really significant things, actually, that I think a lot of people don't necessarily really look into. And yeah, maybe we should talk about on the next show.
Well, this is going to be a big one to talk about because I think as we start to see execution coming through Ripple Treasury, we'll actually see some of what they've been planning all along. And I think that's been a thing that many XRP holders have been waiting to see, kind of the plan play out. And now I think we are on the final stages of the Queen's Gambit right now before we start to see some movement for sure. You guys want to learn a little bit more about what Dom and Phil are doing, you can jump over to EasyA Labs right there. And of course, if you're a developer, this is the place you should be. Definitely is checking out EasyA. So do that as well and download the app. It gives you a lot more functionality. You can get it both on the Google Play and the App Store. Fantastic app, by the way. I've been intrigued by what you guys have been able to do with it. Are you guys building that all in-house, or is it how are you putting that together? It's a beautiful app.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah. It's all in-house. I mean, we have literally the best team. We've been featured on Google's pages. We're proud partners together with them as well, and it's been a dream. I mean, Dom and I actually first built the first version together, a little bit of lore there. But yeah, now we have a fantastic team that helps us to build this. And yeah, Android, iOS, wherever you are, meets users right in the thing that they have in their hands all the time, pretty much these days. Is that fun?
Well, it's doing great.
Free as well for anyone to use. So
there you go, free. There's the two hackathons coming up too. You've got the one just next week or in 2 weeks over in Hong Kong, and then May 5-7 over in Miami. So cool stuff there. Who contributes the money for these prizes?
So usually that's either EasyA together with the partners or the partners directly. So for example, if we look at Consensus, we have amazing partners who will put up sponsor prizes. And also a really, really exciting thing is, in addition to the prizes, we also have grants. Those are either EasyA grants or it's a grant together with one of our partners, which actually help builders continue building their products. So we talk about builders, we talk about the prizes. Like the whole idea behind EasyA is not just, you come to a hackathon and you get a prize. Obviously that's fun, but we want to see people succeed in the ecosystem. And so that's where we actually have like structured grants where people can get, this is the total prize is like 100K. You can get as a single team 100K to continue building your product. And we have some amazing prizes that we are giving out at this hackathon coming up in Hong Kong. We've got an amazing set of prizes that we're giving out at Miami as well, and ultimately grants as well to help builders continue building.
Cool. Can you guys share anything that you're doing at the XRP Vegas event?
Yeah, we've got a lot planned actually. Yeah, we got a lot planned actually. We've been catching up with the hosts, with Brad and a couple of other people. And yeah, ultimately we are really focused on bringing the developers and founders to XRP Las Vegas. XRP Las Vegas typically, before last year when we actually first partnered up to host the Shark Tank pitch competition, was typically very focused around retail and investors. And that's awesome. Obviously, we love retail, we love investors, but I think what a lot of retail and investors want to see is what's actually getting built. What is the capabilities of the XRP Ledger? What kind of people actually do when they come and they build on it? Why are we actually ultimately invested in XRP? And for them to be able to see in real life, people actually building, launching projects and demoing their amazing tools that they built on the XRPL is a completely different experience. So last year, we hosted the first ever XRP Las Vegas Shark Tank pitch competition at the conference. That was a huge success. And this year, we're going to be doing the same thing, just on a much bigger scale. And hopefully we can share more about that soon. But yeah, XRP Las Vegas is an amazing conference and one of our favorites.
I love it. Hey, listen, it's going to be a good one too this year.
Yeah. And one thing I really, really hope that we'll be able to have is something that people can play with from EasyA Labs right there.
Ooh, very cool.
That's something that we're working on internally.
I like it. We will be hosting our media desk there at Las Vegas. We should probably plan for one or two of the devs to get on the show while we're there. So
definitely.
That would be good. Yeah, we should do
Yeah,
that.
I would love to.
Let's plan it. I'll get our team to communicate with you guys in terms of how that coordination is going. We'll be there on April 30th and May 1st. If you guys haven't signed up for that, make sure and jump over to xrplasvegas.com. You can do all that good stuff over there on that. Dom, Phil, it is always a joy chatting with you guys. You're always so level-headed about where the markets are, hopefully calming people down, because I think this week has been a little bit of a roller coaster ride. But thanks for coming in today. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us, Paul.
Excellent. All right, you guys know what to do. Like, subscribe, and we will catch you next time right here on the XRP podcast. Take care.